All right, get to sit in the little egg.
Yeah. Morning.
Morning, everybody.
So let's see, where should we start? Let's go back about 22 years, 96.
Okay.
You were at Crystal Decisions.
Yes.
You were SVP, so a top 10 employee.
Yep.
And that's actually where you had your experience going from 1 to 100.
Yeah.
So if we can stick with the theme of the morning here. Take us back 22 years and maybe, compare what you remember that experience being like going from 1 to 100 to what you see today when companies that are trying to do it, particularly in the enterprise space.
Okay. Well, I'll try not to do my, kind of version of Kim Jong-un that I came down from a mountain on a unicorn and all that, and just focus on...
What's timely, at least.
Yeah, reality. It was an amazing time. A few things have happened between then and now. Internet, smartphones, self-driving cars, ubiquitous connectivity, a few...
Electric scooters.
Yes, that too. And, it feels like an entirely different world, and it was. Back then, scaling a company didn't mean, taking something, putting it online, and just blasting it out to the world. You had to seek ways to distribute software, work with these things called resellers at the time, and all kinds of things that are foreign to us now in the software industry. License revenue and maintenance was a really big deal. And subscription was not a notion except for Jelly in the Month Club, so it was there, but not in software yet. And the company, we really focused Crystal on making one product at the time, Crystal Reports. And then big idea, let's make a server. And in the world of client server, we did that, and the company grew from definitely sub 100, actually over, from the time I was there in late 96 to 2002 to almost 300 million in revenue. That's services, software, the whole 9 yards. And then we were acquired by Business Objects. So this is the fish eating the fish eating the fish in 2002, and then in 07 acquired by SAP. So I went through that entire journey, but seeing the evolution as well as the advent of the internet and ubiquitous kind of bandwidth or high bandwidth and everything from phones were not a thing when I started in 96, other than you had your flip Motorola StarTAC or your flip phone or whatever. So watching that kind of evolution lay the groundwork for where we are today was fascinating. But no one back then could have envisioned, and anybody that says they called it, I'd call BS on that. No one could have envisioned the world we live in today. You have 2 billion active users on a single global network in Facebook. The things that we achieved today, just unfathomable back then. They weren't, it really, in anyone's brain. And Jeff Bezos was selling books. It was quite amazing then.
What were the years of fastest growth? What were your growth rates at that point?
We were probably growing 40, 50% year over year. The one thing that Crystal did that was a stroke of genius, and I had something to do with it, but very little. It was a huge team of people. Was Crystal partnered with Microsoft and embedded Crystal Reports inside of Visual Studio, the development environment, which became Visual Studio and .NET and blah, blah, and still exists today. And so Crystal kind of, a bit of luck, a bit of timing, but Microsoft was distributing millions upon millions of licenses of this product for developers to build. And, from the humble beginnings of Crystal Reports being a tool for developers to use in apps they build in Visual Basic, Microsoft distributed probably 16, 17 million licenses of the product. In standard reporting, it became a household name. And I learned pretty early on, if you want to go big, you got to stand on the shoulders of giants.
So we'll skip forward quickly here. You got acquired by Business Objects.
Yep.
And you got acquired by SAP.
Yep.
Then you left SAP to go to Salesforce.
Correct.
Were there for 2 years, year and a half?
A year and a half, yeah. Mark wooed me away. And
so helping build Force.com.
Yeah, helped build out, helped launch Force.com and build out what we know as the App Exchange today. And that was very exciting, going from, hey, come integrate with Salesforce. And there was a programming language way back when that Salesforce had called Apex, which was like PL SQL with some weird, funky JavaScript wrapped around it. That's matured, obviously, a lot. And Salesforce back then, I think everybody knew it was going to be, kind of the powerhouse in enterprise software.
What was the market cap when you joined?
Oh, gosh, it was certainly sub 10 billion. I mean, yeah, it was. I've hung on to some of that stock, by the way. It's good. It's a fascinating company. It was interesting being outside of Salesforce and at Business Objects SAP and hearing this constant debate over, is this subscription thing going to take off and how do we get there? And my mindset, and I would never self-proclaim genius or anything, I kind of felt like the internet was here to stay. That's where software was going because it was just fundamentally too hard. And Mark, he caught that moment. Everybody remembers the big, no software megaphone, right? That was the moment. And he tapped into what is so powerful about that moment. He tapped into a universal pain that everyone in not just enterprise software, but software knew, which is installing software sucks. It's hard. And he tapped into that kind of almost primal annoyance that we people had with that. And what fascinated me about him was and it's probably the number one lesson I learned from him. He said to me one time, always be relevant. I wasn't sure what that meant at the time, but I've come to fully appreciate it. I can remember him hauling a group of people including me, into his office and talking about SaaS and PaaS, software as a service, platform as a service, the acronyms at the time, and articulating how important cloud computing, the phrase, the term is, like, look at it, go Google it, it's taking off, and being part of that pivot from, hey, we're SaaS and PaaS to we're cloud computing to Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and he understood that the irrelevance, and almost the tired and almost expired notion of SaaS and PaaS, when that's what everyone was calling themselves, and they had just caught up to that. That notion of always being relevant to your buyer has stayed with me for over a decade.
So then why did you go back to SAP and run Business Objects?
Well, I felt like there was a real opportunity to bring disruption in a good way to SAP and to the SAP customer base. SAP was at the time clearly not in the cloud at all. And
this is 2010?
09 and 10, yeah, moving forward. And I had the opportunity to help lead the charge on the analytics front into the cloud. That was really neat. And even in my Business Objects days, I launched the first reporting tool in the cloud. It's how I met Mark, was crystalreports.com. And it was this crazy idea where I was looking at Flickr, which was cool back then at the time. Does anyone remember Flickr, right? Like, okay, thank you. Somebody remembers Flickr. They're like, is that like Instagram? But I remember looking at Flickr going, so you take a photo with your camera at the time. It was not with your phone, just to be clear. You take a picture, you put it on Flickr, then people look at it. And I know you're like, wow, Steve, this does not take a genius to get there. And I thought, well, we take a picture of data with Crystal Reports. What if we take a picture, put it online, let people look at it? So we built that, and that's how I got to know Mark. And it was inventing and or innovating things like that I have a bad habit of gravitating back towards. And I looked at SAP as the world's biggest playground to experiment and try new things and fail. Not everything worked, but it was an amazing 7 years and led me to where I am today.
So you did early startup, M&A, and then you did giant company, multi-billion-dollar company. Now you're kind of in the middle here, running Marketo. Yeah. Talk a little bit about what it's like to work for a private equity-backed company in this context. So,
yeah.
You're in Silicon Valley where you got the VC-backed hyper-growth companies that can burn tons of money and no one cares for a while.
Right.
And then you've got the giant public companies that are out there looking for acquisitions and returning, providing return on investment to investors. Yep. So talk about what it's like to be in the PE-backed world.
Yeah, so first and foremost, before you get to PE, just being private, whether that's VC or PE, is actually pretty cool. I've worked for so many publicly traded companies. Being able to go to a company where you're not, you're worried about quarterly results, but you're not worried about that call with investors on, why was EPS 37 instead of 36 or 38 cents or blah, blah, blah. And being able to think long game and play chess, not checkers, is how I think about it, is actually very cool, number one. And it allows you to make more strategic decisions, which we'll get to in a minute with some of the things we're doing with Google and the like. But working for a PE firm, so when I say PE, you guys think margin. It's a margin play. When I was interviewing and talking to Vista Equity, which is the company that took Marketo private, I asked the founder, Robert Smith, who I consider to be one of the smartest people I've ever met, and he's oriented Vista around software only. They have a playbook. They have a consulting arm that aids us, so all these great things. But I asked him, hey, if I give you 50 points, and you can put 50 points of growth, 0 points of margin, or somewhere in the middle, what do you want Marketo to do? How do you want to transform it? I expected some kind of, we want 30 points of margin, 20 points of growth, blah, blah. He said, 50-0 is good. I'll take 40-10. And it was not the answer I expected, and that caught me off guard. And so we dug into that, and he laid out how they want to leverage their playbook and the things that they've learned in and around software, but start to get more oriented towards growth plays or high growth plays. And so they felt Marketo, the real way to create value for customers, for the industry, and be disruptive is not, hey, let's go crank out 30 points of margin and not innovate. It was the opposite. Let's plow money into the company. Let's build new product. Let's grow. And the short version of the story, when I walked into Marketo, and a lot of this was due to the disruptiveness of being taken private. A lot of things happen. You have turnover. But Marketo's bookings growth, which is the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, for the health of a company, bookings growth had flattened to 2% year over year in 16. I don't mind saying it, it's out there. Not good, right? You're walking in going, okay, that sucks. How am I going to fix this? And it was an extraordinary amount of effort from a lot of amazing people. But last year we grew nearly 20% on bookings, and this year probably 38. So in less than 24 months, we've taken a company that was at 2% bookings growth, and we'll do near 40. We've made 2 acquisitions, and by the way, both of those are sub 10 million ARR in revenue, so most of that growth has been organic.
And what kind of margins are you working on now?
They're still minimal. It's in that it's in that circa 10 or slightly below range. Vista is really committed to putting the money back into the company right now, and they should. The reality is look, I have a high degree of respect for Salesforce, Oracle. They're very sophisticated companies. Those are so I have no desire to tempt fate here, but I'm kind of the biggest fan of what Oracle's done with our primary competitor, Eloqua, because they've basically destroyed it. So that's, go Oracle. And no offense if you work at Oracle, but they've really done a good job.
So you're a big Larry Ellison fan,
oh,
right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Keep doing that. And then, Salesforce, on the other hand, they acquired a smaller company, Pardot, and it's kind of legitimized the marketing automation space, if you will. And while we've evolved our message up market and we're very much oriented and focused on the enterprise now, larger transactions, that competitive landscape has shifted radically. And it definitely helps to have a tailwind. There's no doubt.
So you said being private is great. Obviously, Vista's going to need a return on their investment.
Yeah, I've heard a couple times.
So that comes either through an IPO or through a sale to a larger company. We hear rumors all the time about the types of companies that are circling around you, whether it's Microsoft, Adobe, potentially Salesforce. If you could talk about what your preference would be over the next few years, that would be great. And then also just what happens when those calls come in the door, who fields them, and is it a conversation between you and Robert?
So if the call comes to me, I am very clear, even though I'm the CEO, that I need to call Vista. So that's crystal clear. Those calls do come. We are right now focused on driving Marketo to what we can. I firmly believe Marketo can get to $1 billion in revenue in the next 2 to 3 years. I firmly believe that, And this year,
a few $100 million.
We're over. This year we'll do north of $400 million in revenue, so well above that actually.
And you said the $1 billion was for when?
I'd say probably 2-3 years out, somewhere in there, and that's going to be inorganic and organic. But if we continue on our current growth rate and we make a few acquisitions here and there, I think we can get there. Certainly 3 years at the outside. So for me, it's about kind of this 5-year roadmap. When I started, I'm almost 2 years in to get to $1 billion. And when you're sitting there at, Marketo was between 250 and 260. When in 2016 we did 260 million. So you're kind of scratching your head, going, I only need $750 million more. No problem. Mapping that out, you have to think that way. And the one thing that I found at Marketo, and this is absolutely no disrespect to the founder, Phil Fernandez, I think he's a genius, and built an amazing brand and a great platform and product. That's what I knew about Marketo. I called 25 customers, said, hey, what do you think? And I'm paraphrasing a bit, but it was, you'll take it out of my cold, dead finger. So I kind of knew there was that piece of it, but I'll be fully transparent. The company was lacking the systems, and a lot of the leadership needed to scale. And I think when you're in that 1 to 100 phase, the one bit of advice I would always give is always be thinking about, how can I evolve my team? How can I evolve my systems? How can I evolve my processes so I never get to the point where they break? And I will tell you, I walked into Marketo and there were some processes that were working really well and some that were just flat out broken. And there were some amazing leaders and some that were just not going to make it happen. And you can't, that accordion model that I think people get into of grow and then kind of recast, you can avoid that.
So back to the question, do you want to run a public company again?
Oh, sorry, I didn't. Yeah, I totally dodged your question.
No, it was a good answer, just not to the question.
Yeah. I would love to run a public company. I've only been on the New York Stock Exchange one time with Bill McDermott at SAP's listing anniversary. And it turns out, by the way, you don't hit the bell with a hammer. I always thought you did. You don't. You just press a button. Very anticlimactic,
Did you learn the hard way?
Yeah, well, I was really disappointed, because I was like, oh, it's such a dream. So now I don't know, like press the button. But I think my dream is, I would love to run a public company.
Only a couple minutes. I can't ask the 13 questions I have here for you.
Okay.
But I do want to.
Be more crisp.
No, your answers are good. 20 minutes is tight. You are a major customer of Google Cloud.
Yeah, we're their largest enterprise customer.
In a world where AWS is, I guess their market share is holding steady now, but continuing to grow at 40%. Why'd you choose Google Cloud? And then, well, I have a follow-up to that.
One was Diane Green. Her vision, I believe, supersedes what Amazon has in mind. That's number one. Number two, they're freaking Google. So there's that. I mean, at the end of the day, Google will figure it out. Admittedly, Google Glass, not so much. But Google Cloud Platform, when we looked at that, I feel, it's part of skating to where the puck is headed. I think there's a convergence of MarTech and AdTech. And if you look at Google and Facebook, they own 90% of the digital advertising market in North America. Feels like good alignment. But there are some things that we've done with Google, like we've co-innovated a new AI-based technology called Audience AI. So it's not just Marketo being more efficient. By the way, in making that move, we're saving the company over a 6-year period nearly $300 million in CapEx and OpEx.
Versus what?
Versus us. When I walked into Marketo, we owned and operated all of our own servers and co-load with rack space. It's not a bad model for 2003, but we're in 2018.
Yeah. Are you a Microsoft shop?
In what context? Like I've seen some people wearing shirts, but we don't use any of their. We use some of the core like Microsoft Office technology, but we don't use Microsoft on the back end.
So were they part of the equation when you were considering going to the cloud?
Absolutely. I mean, Microsoft is a customer of Marketo's, as is AWS, as is Google. And they were all before we actually looked at moving. So you can imagine how that conversation was completely uncomfortable.
And just really quick, Google has all these AI capabilities in their cloud. How do you view using Google's capabilities versus building your own?
I think that companies, you know, look, it's very important to have IP as a company, intrinsically have that. But you have to decide what business you are in. The day I walked in the door at Marketo, I found that Marketo was not just in the business of marketing automation. It was in the business of running a massive data center. It's not the business that we're in. And there's a long list of other things like inventing yet another AI, you know, platform, and let's, you know, instead of calling it Watson, call it Sherlock. We shouldn't be in those businesses. The reality is that technologies like TensorFlow exist for AI. And so when I said stand on the shoulders of giants, I guess what I would append that with is pick your IP, pick your battles very carefully. Know what business you should be in, and more importantly, know which ones you should not be in.
Good place to end. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep.